All right. Hello, everyone. Thanks so much for joining us for this virtual recording around mapping justice, designing geospatial tools for social change. So we're going to go ahead and dive right in, and we're very excited to be a part of Florida Climate Week and the inaugural one. All right, so at the center of what we're focusing on is this idea that to solve society's most complex issues, including a lot of the environmental and climate issues we're seeing today, we need to be drivers of liberatory innovation. For us, we see that we often see the world of data, technology, and STEM in one place, and then the worlds of social responsibility and community impact in another. These two worlds sometimes don't coexist. But at Trouble & Co., we really see that we need to consider both of these together and see how the worlds of STEM can be used to push for local change and for community impact, especially whenever we're thinking about the environment. So this is what's the intersection that we focus on at Trouble & Co. And so as a quick intro, Trouble & Co. is a tech justice nonprofit where we focus on supporting youth to tackle complex societal challenges using data, design, and technology. So thinking about how we can bring these worlds together, but really focus on youth who are at that critical stage where we're thinking about what's next, what am I going to do, how can I make an impact, and seeing what we can do together. And so Trouble & Co. has a couple different programs, but our main program called Mapping Justice, which is what this session focuses on, is a summer program for high schoolers where they're with us for a couple of weeks in the summer, typically fully virtual, where we learn about geospatial tools for social change. And so I'm going to give a quick intro on it, but the best way to learn about this is from learning from our students. So we have a wonderful panel of 4 students with us here today who will share a little bit about their projects in this course and also their experiences broadly. And so as a quick intro on Mapping Justice, this is a summer program that has 3 key components. The first is instruction on geospatial data analytics, so GIS. For those of you who may not be familiar with what this is, when you think about Google Maps, the technology that makes that possible is GIS. So thinking about maps. And so we bring together this curricula on geospatial data analytics, how we can visualize data, make sense of a spreadsheet that by itself may not be telling me anything, but when I put it into a map and it's visual, can really tell a story of impact. And then we pair this with curricula on race, power, and technology. So thinking about what does technology use responsibly mean? What are the good impacts of technology? What are the unintended consequences of it? How can we use technology to make a positive change? And then lastly, students are all paired together or working alone to create their student capstones. So this is a project that they choose an issue that they care about and then create a capstone around it. And so we'll have our students, our alumni here today share a little bit about what they shared, which is very exciting. So as I mentioned, Mapping Justice is a typically fully virtual program. It started in 2020 with MIT, and then has been scaled to other geographies since then. So in 2023, we started in Florida, which we actually have 2 alumni from that first cohort with us today. And then this summer, we also continued the program across the entire state, and we have 2 other students with us today from this year's cohort. So this is how we've been scaling, and we're very excited to continue having impact in Florida, especially as we see that a lot of environmental issues are becoming more and more prominent, and we need to be equipped to do something about it. And so with our programs in Florida, the Mapping Justice broadly was originally very social justice oriented, just broadly on social impact. But within Florida, we very much focus around the environment. So thinking about what does coral bleaching look like? How is it impacting our communities? What does water contamination look like? What are the impacts of rising heat? So all of these different issues that we have increasingly been seeing, which is actually very on cue, especially right now, as we saw a hurricane pass through the region and has been having a lot of impacts, not just in Florida, but in other states as well in the Southeast. So this is a program that really thinks about what can we do about these things that we're seeing. And so this is Mapping Justice, but the best way to learn about this is from our students. And so our students are developing these 3 key areas. The first is technical proficiency, thinking about what are technical skills that students can gain so that they can actually have the skills to do something in the future. And then second is critical consciousness, being able to identify why are these environmental issues the way they are? what is at the root of these things and these patterns that we're seeing, and what can I do about it? And then lastly, we have self-efficacy, which pairs together this technical part with the critical consciousness to think about what can we do and what are steps to get there in our communities. And so we're very focused on mapping justice, which is our summer program. We also have workshops, which are open to broader students where it's more kind of a one-off or a couple of sessions that we have with them. But mapping justice is the main program that we focus on, which is where we have our students here today to talk about. And so a little bit on why we chose GIS. So GIS is a low code tool that has a lot of lower barriers to entry than some coding tools do, but we can still learn a lot of data visualization, data analytical skills with it. And it's very interdisciplinary. As you'll see with some of our projects, there's a wide range of topics that we can get into, from health to civil rights to economics, where students can really think about, okay, this is a topic that's really interesting to me, and these are different ways that I can apply geography and GIS to it. And so we pair with our students so that they can see what they can do in alignment with their interests. And so before I pass it on to our students to share more about their own projects, to share a little bit more about what the process is that our students go through. So first off, we start off with an analysis, exploring what are some certain factors around in our communities that inform why we're seeing environmental inequities, why the current state of the environment is the way that it is. So thinking very much about the present state of things. Then we think about a vision, a future for what we want in our communities. What are the liberatory futures that we want, not just for our families, but also the places we grew up in, the states that we're in, and really thinking about what do I want for my future. And then lastly, we have strategy. So thinking about how we can get from that present state of things to the future state of things, and what are the steps to get to that future. And so we really approach this using geospatial tools to direct that change. So there's some pictures here of some of our past student projects, but I always love hearing from our students. So I'm going to pass it over to our students to talk a little bit more about their projects now. And so I have a couple capstone projects here. I'm going to pass it off first to Jules, who was an alumni from our first cohort in Florida. And I will pass it on to you, and I'll screen share a little bit of their capstone projects.
Okay. Hello, my name is Juliana Norris, but I also go by Jules. Currently, I am a senior at Lely High School in Naples, Florida, which is located in the Collier County, Marco Island region. So essentially my project focused on water contamination based off of local data provided by Lee County's GIS. And so essentially we dived into essentially evaluating the causes of water contamination and how it correlates with low income areas. So what we essentially did is we integrated social economical factors, so social economical factors like demographic data, and we compared that with the relevancy or the frequency at which water is contaminated in certain areas in Lee County. And we found a relationship between low-income areas with high likelihoods of water contamination. And once we did that, we dived into the research on possible reasonings behind this and how essentially there's a long history of essentially oppression when it comes to um, low income individuals and groups in certain regions, and how we have to essentially advocate for individuals to make sure they have access to clean water, even though they may not have as much money as other individuals.
Amazing. Thanks so much, Jules. And as we can see here are some of the maps that the team came up with as part of this project. And I'm going to try and continue scrolling through it so we can see all of the projects before we move on to the next students. So here's some of the dashboards that the team created and some more of the research that went into it. All right. And I will also make sure that as part of the virtual platform that this screen recording is shared on, that there'll also be links to these capstone projects so that participants can see can explore more in depth what these projects were on. All right. And with that, I'm going to pass it over now to Amber to share about their project.
Hello, I'm Amber, and I pretty much focused on coral bleaching and specifically how it's being exacerbated by wastewater and wastewater facilities. So I kind of was focusing on every aspect of this from economics, which it affects ecotourism because a lot of people come to Florida specifically to see the coral reefs. It also impacts the local communities because these wastewater facilities are actively dumping like contaminated water into communities filled with people that are trying to live and thrive. And I also was able to see kind of accidentally through the data and mapping that the low income like counties within Florida tended to have more wastewater facilities. So that also correlated with like vulnerable like people being like disregarded and kind of pushed back by the government and not really paid attention to. So this is like a smaller issue that kind of shows a bigger issue behind it. Um, that's pretty much all I have to that. There's a lot of little details, but that's the majority.
Amazing. Thanks so much, Amber. And I always really love the dashboard that you created. It's very visual, very creative. And yeah, thanks so much for also pointing out how this is in a topic that it might seem that it's just about wastewater, but really illustrates a lot of patterns that are common across a lot of environmental topics that we see, especially in Florida and around the Gulf Coast region. All right, and I'm going to continue scrolling so we can see a little bit more of the story map. But again, I'll have links on the virtual platform so people can read more in depth into these projects and see the full extent of the research that our students made. All righty, and now I will pass it now on to Anna to share about her projects.
Hello, everyone. My name is Anna. I'm a senior at NSU University School, and I'm living in Broward County right now. My team's project was on hurricanes and their impact on Florida communities. We chose this topic because hurricanes are an occurrence that is typically annual for Florida residents and anyone who's living in or traveling to Florida. The issue, what can often get overlooked or seem like a natural part of being a Floridian, but in reality, a lot of low-income counties and people that are disadvantaged, whether through being elderly of an older age or without having access to certain like programs and resources, are hit very strongly by these hurricanes. We noticed the correlation between living on the west, as those counties often get like frequently hit by hurricanes. A lot of pathways go through the west side of Florida, as you can see in like the map being shown here in the story map. Also, a lot of the highlight of this project was kind of to show that while hurricanes aren't a man-made problem, there are a lot of there's a lot of correlation in things where the neglect of the government, whether at a local or state level, can directly impact and influence the quality of people's lives and how protected and ready they are to respond to hurricanes and natural disasters, which like goes into the entire Mapping Justice program, highlighting climate justice and topics of that nature. And that's kind of a succinct version of all that we put into this.
Amazing. Thank you, Anna, for sharing. And I feel like, yeah, this is very timely to be talking about hurricanes. I know we had a hurricane in 2022 that went through the region, and now we just had a hurricane also pass through that's impacted more of the northern part of Florida. So it's very much a topic that I think is on a lot of people's minds on what are the impacts of hurricanes, what can we do about it, and everything related to climate exacerbating some of these issues. All right. With that, we're going to go on to our last alumni, Tracy, to share about her projects.
Hello, so my name is Shrishti. I'm a senior at Horizon High School and I live in Orange County. So our project was about the impacts of waste and nutrient runoff in Florida, where we started with the basic question of the statement that everyone produces waste. And in turn, Florida's population is increasing as per the year, as one, we're a very popular tourist destination, and people just generally like to move to Florida for the sunny weather. So when we were researching about wastewater facilities and their impacts on water runoff, we noticed how in Florida that wastewater facilities tend to be very unimpressive, as in they are not very up to date, or they tend to be very mismanaged. So while we were studying, we looked at using GIS. We looked at location of facilities near like marginalized communities where we focused on low income and communities where a lot of people of color are located. Then we started looking through maps that concerned water violations, where we noticed things in urban versus rural areas, where we noticed that a lot of water violations occur in urban areas, which makes sense. Urban areas is very like cities. That's where all majority of people are located in. But as we were analyzing these water violations, we've noticed that there's tons of toxic metals that are being reported in these water contaminations. And these toxic metals include like nitrogen, which, if too much of nitrogen, can lead to poor health problems for the people and a poor impact on the environment itself. So, as we continued examining, we decided to locate on one specific wastewater facility, and we analyzed how many low income communities were near it. And from there, we observed there were a lot. And this is no coincidence, as Florida city councils, they usually like to put wastewater facilities in areas where it is low income and very underdeveloped. So from there, we studied multiple counties. So we studied stuff like from Miami and other places in Central Florida to focus on the whole wastewater contaminates water with toxic metals. And from there, we decided that a lot of the problems were in those wastewater facilities. So we looked at solutions that included revamping those Florida facilities and maybe implementing a filtration system to solve our wastewater problem. And that is pretty much it of our project.
Thanks so much, Tracy. I really appreciate how this project especially kind of highlighted the differences among rural and urban areas, but also certain demographics around wastewater facilities that sometimes we don't think about where these facilities are placed, but there's sometimes a lot of intentional, not very kind of harmful impacts behind where they're placed. All right, so with that, we're gonna go on to having our students share a little bit more about their experiences in the program. So we're going to transition over now to a panel discussion where I have a few questions for our students, and we'll just do whoever wants to answer the questions can go ahead, and we can go ahead and transition to that. So we heard about you all's projects, which is amazing and great. And some of you all also touched around where you're coming from, whether you're a senior in high school, what location you're in. But I'm curious if you could also just tell us a little bit more about yourself for people who are interested in learning about who are the students that were part of this program, and just, yeah, if you want to as well, what got you interested into this, but just, yeah, could you tell us a little bit more about yourself?
Since I was the first one, I'll go ahead and start. Once again, my name is Juliana and I go by Jules. So a little bit about myself, I'm very interested in engineering, so especially operation research. So I love the idea of being able to maximize the efficiency of how much energy is needed to be consumed in the item in order to get a reaction or a product. And so one of the main reasons on why I wanted to join Treble and Co's Mapping Justice program is because there was such a lack of opportunity in my county specifically when it came to STEM. And so once I saw there was an opportunity to be able to be involved in a program that's not only focusing on STEM and it allows you to build a capstone project, but it also has the virtual opportunity, which allowed me to work part-time while I was doing research. And so I really wanted to have the chance to basically dive into data science and see how we could essentially understand statistics and be able to come up with conclusions based off of that. And so that's one of the main reasons why I wanted to join, because I really just wanted to learn more, gain the opportunity to learn more about the things that make me passionate, engineering and just STEM overall.
Amazing. Thanks so much, Jules, for sharing. I definitely resonate with that. I studied engineering and I'm now very interested in going into kind of energy and the renewable energy space. So yeah, very interesting intersections. Whoever wants to share next, you can feel free to come off mute.
So I connect the same way as Jules said previously, like saying that she was interested in engineering, because it's also me too. I am actually interested in mechanical engineering. And the reason I got really into this program was there's a real lack of like STEM opportunities for students who want to like go into like places of STEM. So when I received this program, I actually got recommended by a counselor from another program, and she told me about this program, and she would say, I know you're in Florida, so I think you might be interested because this seems like up your alley. And I immediately jumped to the opportunity because, as I said previously, there's a very lack of STEM opportunities, especially for the youth. And I think this program was like really great opportunity for people who want to go into STEM. And also, while in the program, it was really nice because it was like remote. The learning space was really different. It allowed me to like ask questions, feel comfortable in the classroom, and be able to actually like gain some like GIS skills.
I'll go next. So once again, I'm Anna. I am highly involved at school and outside of school in a lot of like diversity clubs, which are focused on diversity, equity, inclusion, and social justice issues. I'm also a tutor. I volunteer for tutoring and at pet shelters. I'm involved in Girls Who Code, which is like a club that teaches non-binary individuals and girls how to code, and Art from the Heart, where we create craft kits and send them to children in hospitals. So in many ways, I'm always like looking for opportunities where I can help those around me or get involved in my community. But one of the things that really stood out to me about mapping justice is that I'd be able to use STEM, which is something that I'm very interested in as someone who wants to do computer science or something related to STEM in the future, and put it into work that would help people or something that would make an impact or show me how to take steps toward or forward, making a change in the community that I live in. So that was kind of a very big and important detail about mapping justice for why I chose to do this.
Amazing. Thank you so much on that. I feel like I also resonate with that, where it's like, yes, the STEM, but also how can I use it to help people where I'm from? And yeah, Amber, and you can go on.
So I didn't give much of an introduction to begin with, so I guess I'll do that now. I am from, excuse me, I'm from Fort Myers, Florida, which is in Lee County. And at the time of taking Mapping Justice, I went to North Fort Myers High School. Now I am a first-year undergraduate at the University of South Florida in St. Petersburg, and I'm actually majoring in geography and GIS, so that's really exciting. I also just declared my concentration, which is environment and society. So I am going to be continuing with the mapping justice track pretty well. I say within school currently, I'm getting involved with the Student Green Energy Fund, which is like for every credit hour that a student takes, $1 is donated to this fund, and it's used to make our campus more green and more sustainable. And then just like a little fun one is Puppy Love Club. We kind of work towards training and raising puppies to work as guide dogs or therapy dogs. I specifically joined Mapping Justice because I was recommended by my high school marine science teacher, and it just seemed like a good resume builder and learning experience, and it definitely was a learning experience like no other, and I would never take it back. Lastly, I guess a little fun fact that I wanted to share is I have a really big passion for researching and studying coral reefs and mangrove forests.
Amazing. Thanks so much, Amber. Yeah, super exciting how you're continuing to do this work. And yeah, very excited to see how your passion for corals and mangroves and everything around that continues growing. All right, so we can go on to our next question. So very much on theme with the climate and environmental topic. What does climate resiliency mean to you?
Okay, so climate resiliency means to me that first, I feel like climate resiliency can be broken down in varying steps. And I think the most prominent one is being able to recognize either individually and as a society the essentially the changes in our climate. So being able to identify and be able to accept that there are changes in our environment that are heavily affecting individuals, especially individuals that are very disproportionated and essentially taken advantage of, we can essentially move forward. And so that kind of goes into the second step of climate resiliency. So climate resiliency is being able to move together as a society and basically join hand in hand to collaborate, joining STEMs in the humanities. So using history of past solutions, as well as using innovative technological advancements to essentially create ways that we can combat climate change. And so one approach is obviously GIS. So being able to take a historical evidence like the census or demographic data and things that we have been able to track in the past, and then be able to use basically satellite imagery and things like that to record the degradation of soil and things like that. And so essentially overall what I'm trying to say is climate resiliency is defined as being able to identify problems when it comes to climate change, and then being able to accept that and take a step forward in order to combat that together as a society, because it's important for us to collaborate.
Amazing. I feel like you put that so succinctly, but I also know other people have amazing thoughts as well. So would love to hear what other people want to share as well around what does climate resiliency mean to you?
So for me, climate resiliency means like coming together as a community to stand up for your environment. So I see this like very common and basically like in our program where we kind of came together like as groups during our session, and we came together as groups from different parts of Florida who came together, and we were recognizing an issue where we thought that it was being overlooked, and we came together, we researched, we put our like kind of heart soul into finding ways to like come up with solutions or finding ways to raise awareness of that climate issue, which I think is a really big part of climate resiliency, as it's kind of the way where you come together as a community to be stronger as a community and to be strong together in order to stand up for what is happening in the environment.
Kind of echoing what has already been said, I think climate resiliency is very largely acknowledging the fact that climate change is a very serious and impactful factor that is impacting every aspect of our society. And the fact that we have to, as as people, as citizens, as people with either working in government or wherever we may be, we all need to come together to make changes in the systems that we have, in our policies, in the way that we consume energy, and many other aspects. Because with this, that way we can be better prepared or prevent or protect against the future disasters that could come from climate change, destroying our society and causing like problems that would be irreversible.
Just to throw a little cherry on top, I'll say my piece. I kind of view climate resiliency as as was previously stated multiple times, like everyone just coming together and acknowledging and being educated on climate change, and then being able to work towards a more sustainable future and like combat the specific issues being faced by communities already, and then also like slowing the progression of what's happening.
Amazing. Yeah, I feel like you all put it so well together. I was actually thinking about this more on the resiliency side. I was asked the question, what does resiliency mean? And I often think about it as just being able to exist as who we want to be, as who our communities want to be. And a lot of that, when I think about within the climate, is that our climate is changing and it's having a lot of negative impacts on the communities we call home. So climate resiliency to me also means just being able to exist in the places we love and have lived on and have grown up in, and so that future generations can also have the same experiences we had, which, yeah, is definitely going to take a collective effort to address that. But I think it's also inspiring to see that there are so many people who are passionate about addressing this. All right, and so now to go on the theme of collective impact, what does justice mean to you?
What justice means to me personally, is being able to acknowledge right from wrong, and being able to acknowledge right from wrong and being able to move forward past that, and making sure that those um, who were essentially taken advantage of, or those who were not taken into consideration, are being able to be taken care of. So when it comes to climate justice right now, so being able to acknowledge, either as a society and either as a government official, to as a government official, be able to recognize and acknowledge that, hey, maybe we didn't take into consideration how this town is very close to the beach, and so we didn't put into place the correct precautions. And so once you be able to acknowledge that, kind of similar to climate resiliency, we're able to move past that and work towards essentially making sure that we're able to combat those, not only for the present, but also for the future, so future generations can be able to live on the land.
On that topic of justice, my definition is very similar to Jules. I just wanted to also add about, for me, justice is like righting our wrongs. So this is something that came from the program itself. I really like this saying. It was like sparking good trouble, just like the program name, Trouble and Co. So I really admired that aspect of justice, and where we recognize what is going wrong and we correct that issue.
Yes, completely agree with both what Suresti and Jules have said so far. I would only have to add that I think justice is when we seek out equity and give everyone the ability to live their lives, knowing that their rights, their environment, and their community is protected. It's when we give a voice to the people that are being disadvantaged, or the people that really need to have a voice to cause change and to have their opportunities protected or given back to them. So for sure, it's that fairness, the equity, and giving everyone the ability to live their lives freely and in a way where they feel safe and heard.
I agree completely, especially with the giving a voice to the people that don't have one. That is something that I've been thinking about through this question. I would take the definition as like taking a stand for proper treatment of people and also our environment, because that impacts our people. So again, like specifically focusing on those who are vulnerable or at risk or just disadvantaged in any way. And this is especially important to me because like most of our climate problems are anthropogenic, but we can also solve them if people have the proper motivations and effort. So like justice is taking the time and effort to actually get the outcome you're looking for in equity and equality and all of that.
Yeah, I love that reframing of that. These are issues that, yes, are human caused, but also that means, yes, humans can do something about it and we can do something about it. And also, yeah, just centering on that, we really want to focus on people and planet together because we are so interconnected. Yeah, and then when I think about justice as well, yeah, it's everything that you all have said and so encompassed so clearly. All right, our next question, which we kind of already got into a little bit, why did you choose to participate in mapping justice? Maybe since I feel like you all have already sort of answered it, I'm curious if you could speak on if you had any past experience with GIS, and if you did that influence you wanting to do that? If you didn't, did that also like, what was the experience like participating in a program where it has like GIS is a big part of it, but you might not know what it was before going into it?
When I had began mapping justice program, I had no idea what geographical information systems were. I even took the initiative to basically research before I even applied and even after I was accepted, but I still didn't have that clear understanding and definition of it. However, once I started my capstone project and just started the first day of class, I really understood essentially the implications of what GIS was and the potential that it could have.
Yeah, I was on that same boat. Like before this program, I had no idea what GIS was. I figured it was something very close to GPS. So that was like my only backbone on this. But like once going into the class was so flexible and you were able to comfortably ask questions about working with this technical skills and you were able to learn about it. And I felt really like by the end of this whole program, I was really comfortable with working with GIS to the point that I'm starting to use GIS for like other projects that I'll be working on at school.
I can completely relate and totally agree with like using GIS for school-related projects because it really is so interdisciplinary and you can use it for so many different things. Um, Prior to doing mapping justice, I had no idea that it was a thing. I never knew that this was a skill that I could learn. And I'm so glad I stuck to it and learned how to apply it and use it for social change because it really is so impactful. You can have the rhetoric and the arguments that like show that your case or whatever you're fighting for is important, but when you can visualize data and combine variables like your age or your demographics and the relationship between like where you live and take that all together into one map, it creates a very powerful thing for people to look at and see and tie to whatever you are trying to fight for.
Similar to all of you, I had no idea what GIS was until my first day of class. Um, I had some previous like coding experience and some like computer skills that I was able to apply, but honestly, the program that we used, ArcGIS Online, was so user friendly that learning it was such an easy, like flowing process. And it was something that I really enjoyed because I was able to like use the technology for something I was so passionate about and not have to struggle so much with the technology side of things that I couldn't convey the messages. And as Anna was saying, like GIS is so powerful in the fact that like visualizing data is so much different than just seeing it laid out in front of you, just in words and numbers. It's like you can really tell a story that can drive people to share the passion and take action.
Amazing. That actually transitions so well into one of our other questions around what value does data-backed GIS bring into advancing social changes? So we've touched on it a little bit, but would love to get additional thoughts on that. And yeah, what value does data-backed GIS bring into advancing social change?
Yeah, I think Hannah brought up a great point. So when we had began our lessons in mapping justice, there was a heavy focus on how GIS really focused on making sure that data was accessible and that it was readable. So one lesson I recall is how we essentially had a lesson on where we used GIS to basically um, sketch out hurricane evacuation routes. And through that lesson, we learned the importance of having people that maybe only speak one language and that may not be English be able to read the signs and basically the colors and the color scheme and everything like that and still be able to interpret the graph. And so by using GIS, which focuses heavily on visualization, we can essentially create basically use color schemes and lines and different shapes for us different shapes for people that may not be familiar to statistics and basically data and anything like that, be able to basically have a greater understanding and comprehension of essentially what's being presented towards you. And so one thing my project in specifically focused on was making sure that we emphasize the usage of color. So we use red and blue, which contrast one another, but it showed basically the danger or the high concentration of water contamination in comparison to blue, which is more of a cooler and more safer. So using basically connotations of different colors, individuals are able to interpret a graph or a map specifically, and be able to understand it. And I think that has so much more potential, so much more implication than just seeing and knowing that 10 is greater than 1.
Yeah, and on that whole thing, the huge value of the data-backed GIS systems were definitely for their visual representation, as looking at image is such a universal language. Anyone can do it. And I think the big component for GIS with data is that we're able to scientifically show data to people who are not experts in the field, and we're able to easily explain it to everyone because everyone can visually see it. As Jules say with the colors, people can see red as bad, green as good. So that was one of the biggest value, is that visual representation and that anybody can easily understand it.
Completely agree. I think GIS is also really powerful in the way that it uncovers patterns that you might have not realized from just looking at a spreadsheet of data, of numbers and letters. It uncovers a lot of data that normally would have been overlooked, a lot of things that I think people don't realize until they see it in a map form. I think a lot of communities would benefit from GIS, and a lot of social change initiatives benefit from GIS because it's so powerful in combining both what you see and what you hear together in one. And just the entirety of the mapping and aspect of this tool creates a very powerful way for people to show and support why whatever they are doing or whatever they are trying to change, or whatever aspect of society they're trying to help is important.
On the exact same track, I'd say accessibility is definitely something that GIS brings to the plate. You can use data that it's just, you have to decipher it. It just doesn't make sense and you can't visualize it in your head as easily, to produce maps that are much easier to digest. And again, was being said, it's understandable for the general public, and it can even be understood by, again, people who English isn't their first language, or even people who are colorblind, blind, deaf, anything like that, where communication becomes more difficult for them. So it's you're able to convey something that's kind of a difficult to understand concept and show the range and intensity of the issues being faced and make it more accessible and understandable for the general public.
Yeah, I love that note on making it accessible to the general public, because I feel like especially a lot of STEM fields sometimes feel so difficult to understand. And for somebody, I always think about this when I think about talking to my family about what I do within STEM. And it's how do I both explain what I do and then also translate it to Spanish? And it's that's a little bit complicated. Not a lot of people understand it. But it's so important to still be able to communicate a lot of the insights that we can get from data, from tech, from all of that. And especially when we think about within the environment and climate crisis, we are going to need more people to be aware of this. And I feel yeah, maps are, as you all were saying, are such a powerful way to visualize data that is a lot easier to understand. So yeah, I feel like you all were touching very much on what this course taught you about data visualization. So I'm actually going to go to some of the challenges. What were some of the biggest challenges you faced while using GIS? Was it data gathering, data analysis, storytelling, this bringing together the software and technical, maybe some of that visualization piece? So yeah, if y'all could share around that, and feel free, you can go in any order. It doesn't have to be in the same one as before.
I'll quickly say that one of the main challenges I faced was probably the learning curve. During the first couple of weeks, like when we were just getting started with ArcGIS, it was a bit tricky understanding why certain analyses were like resulting in the results and the products that we saw, or how do we make certain variables overlap with one another and see how they intertwine. So kind of getting used to using the program itself and seeing how you can apply it was the main difficulty. It was as we went on, it all got figured out.
Yeah, to kind of go back to what Asenet had previously said, the Mapping Justice program really focuses on self-efficient efficiency. And so basically being able to, I think the most hardest part is being able to find reliable data. There was a large emphasis put on to essentially finding credible data sets that are essentially backed and can be validated, because it's important that as a researcher you're able to confirm that, hey, this data that I'm providing is accurate, so you're not misguiding the general public, especially because maps are very easily interpreted. You want to make sure that what you're trying to interpret is accurate and it's not being interpreted in opposite of what is essentially the reality. And so finding basically these data sets was very difficult. So learning how to find credible data sources, so either census information or looking at EPAs and things like that, just organizing it and finding it was very, very difficult. And then the other part is that kind of goes back to basically the visualization aspect of GIS, is finding out what type of color scheme and what type of data do you want to do obviously we did a storyboard, but do you want to do a dashboard? How do you want to organize your dashboard? What do you want to put on your dashboard? Do you want to put a data table? Do you want to put descriptions? Do you want to put a value gauge and things like that? So finding out on a more stylist basis, how do you want to present your data to someone, and how are you able to present your data in the most efficient way that clearly conveys what's being portrayed in your story?
I will follow behind. I'd say very similar to that. One of my biggest issues was trying to find up-to-date, credible data, because you can't be using data from the 90s to convey a story that's happening now. It's just not going to be the story you're looking for at all. And also trying to find like the specific variables I was looking for. So like, for example, I was looking at coral bleaching. So I wanted to find like the status of the bleaching. And there's also a big issue of there's different types of agencies that survey the data. So they have it all in different databases. So I kind of had to work with what I had and just work around those issues. And then again, the visual appeal, trying to make it accessible and understandable, especially because my topic of coral bleaching isn't a widely understood problem. So I kind of had to figure out how to make that understandable while making it like bringing awareness to the issue.
For me, during the whole process of making those GIS projects, I felt like the hardest thing for me was limiting, like making the data on the maps easy to read. And what I mean is, like, sometimes you feel inclined to put a lot of data into it. Like for me, when we were talking about toxic metals and their samplings through all of Florida, we were thinking of putting like nitrogen, mercury, and CO2, and all these sort of emissions. And then there's this time and moment where you have to like step back and think about what is like the most important thing I want to present, and what we can't have like very clustered data. So from there, you have to talk to yourself and also get like peer feedback from like everybody in the class to consider what are the most important data you think will work, and what data do you think will communicate your idea to people efficiently.
Uh, I would like to also add on to something. I feel like we haven't, I want to kind of touch on something we haven't spoken about. So as we were previously introducing ourselves in our project, we could obviously see that we had our maps and dashboards and things like that. But in between those maps and dashboards, we had information like paragraphs. And I think basically GIS really kind of forces you or kind of motivates you to kind of dive into your research topic beyond what is presented in the data set. So one thing that was important for my project specifically is that once I figured out water contamination in different areas, I then had to figure out what type of water plants are nearby. And once I had to do that, I had to figure out, hey, when were these established and what was the purpose of these water plants and what communities do these water plants specifically service to? And so once we did that, we were able to kind of get a more holistic idea of, hey, this is our problem, just this is our problem. We can back it up by statistics, but more on a historical aspect. This is what has been historically happening. This was the intention of the project, and this is when the moment kind of the purpose of the project kind of misaligned, and this is how this community was taken advantage. So I think GIS really allows us to mix the humanities and the STEMs together, and it allows us to kind of have basically, if we wanted to dive into a topic, we're able to already have kind of like background information um, as well as credible sources um, to kind of start a research paper if we were ever interested.
Right. Yes, it's kind of like asking that those things in between the like lines that we don't ask about on the surface level that data might not be getting into, but what GIS is like, oh no, I actually need to like ask these maybe challenging questions that I don't have the answer to and figure out, okay, so what is really behind all of this? All right, and yeah, to close us out, one final question. I'm very curious, and some of you may have already slightly touched on it already. How do you plan to use the skills you gained beyond the course? Whether you've already started doing it in school or some future ideas you have for your career, anything like that. Would love to hear from you all.
So I'll say that I'm going to be hosting a learning session for Girls Who Code, where I'm going to be teaching members how to use GIS and how to create like a map that like relates to a topic that they care about. So that's one way for sure. Also, I'm probably going to be using GIS to just see which communities in Florida and near me would benefit most from whatever thing I'm trying to do. I think once again, visualizing, seeing where exactly do I need to focus on the most, or can I say like this is the area or this is the community that I can reach out to and somehow get involved with, or tell others to, hey guys, we should focus on this community and give them the resources or help that they need.
Yeah, that's really incredible. For me personally, I'm on my second app this year when it comes to developing. And so for both of my apps, we use artificial intelligence. However, beyond that, we also use GIS. So we focus really on essentially enriching geographical information and finding out from my app that I'm currently building with my friends, we're essentially using data points to kind of be able to basically use track basically what um, what products are accessible for ingredients because we're creating an app when it comes to identifying food and what food is accessible. And then recently, I actually did a project with the Smithsonian Education Science Department, and I used Geographical Information Systems to track food waste on a national level. And so I collaborated with three other students and one in Indonesia actually to basically be able to find enriching data and put it on a map and then be able to present it to um, some staff at the Smithsonian Museum. And then I also this is beyond basically the climate issue. For GIS, I created a project on basically the Great Migration with the support of Trouble and Co, who offered me an activation grant. And I basically dived into basically what the Great Migration was and how essentially we could track back basically factors of the Great Migration, so influences such as economical opportunities, policies, and things like that, and how that affected the immigration of African Americans. And right now, for my AP research class, I'm kind of going more into the Great Migration. So I'm hoping, well, my plan is to write my 5,000 word paper focusing on using GIS to basically track the migration of African Americans enslaved individuals.
I will follow up. I am currently majoring in Geographic Information Systems, as I said. I'm anticipating my bachelor's in 2028, so obviously only in my first year, but I'm about to start doing job shadowing with someone from the local United States Geological Survey office, which is right across the street from my dorm, so that's really cool. And that could possibly lead to an internship or a job, whether it be part-time or long-term. And in general, I plan to continue studying GIS and like learning more about how I can use it environmentally and socially and just apply it, especially locally to St. Petersburg. I've learned that this area has a lot of history and a lot of issues that kind of go under the rug, but this campus focuses a lot on sustainability and environmental like aspects. So I'm hoping to use that more locally. And once I graduate, I will probably continue into my master's or doctorate and continue that.
So continuing from the Mapping Justice Summer Program, I started looking into environmental or nonprofit organizations, and I found one that works with light pollution internationally. And that's where I started using GIS. We conduct research on light pollution in order to communicate these issues to the United Nations. So I get to work with people from like all over the US, some place in Asia, and we kind of work together on a research that focuses on solving the light pollution crisis. Being in my group, I'm actually one of the only few members who knows how to use GIS. So I use a lot of my skills and a lot of my time to like create maps to study light pollution, like the progression from like the past to now. In addition, is very similar to Jules. I also have an AP research class right now, and I'm also using GIS. I'm conducting it specifically to Florida and in concerns of light pollution from Disney and other theme parks. And I'm seeing how that contributes environmentally and socially to people who live around Central Florida, as I'm a person who lives like just 30 minutes away from Disney.
Wow, this is all really cool. Thank you so much, everybody, for sharing that. I'm so excited to, like explore more of what y'all are all doing. It's always super cool to see like what you all continue to do. Um, with that, I am gonna close this out. I know we're a little bit over time, but it's a recorded session, so people can just watch a little longer. But yeah, thank you everybody virtually who has come in and watched this recording. And if you ever want to stay in touch, I mean, you can reach out to Trouble & Co. This is our name. Trouble. And yeah, if you want to reach out, our email is hello@trouble.co. And yeah, we're super excited to continue doing this work in Florida. And yeah, everything that all of our students have been getting up to is super amazing. And we're excited to, yeah, continue seeing how you all continue and go on to spark some good trouble. All right. Well, thank you, everybody. And I am now going to stop the recording.